The quiet, suburban street of Arlington Heights had never seen anything like the scene unfolding just after midnight on a humid summer night, when the red and blue lights of nearly 30 police vehicles flooded the neighborhood with a chaotic glow that reflected off windows and lawns like a storm of sirens. And neighbors who had been asleep minutes earlier were now peeking nervously through curtains as officers in tactical gear surrounded the modest two-story home belonging to a woman named Maya Carter, a calm and private resident known mostly for keeping to herself, jogging every morning before sunrise, and rarely engaging in neighborhood gossip. Yet on that particular night, the police seemed absolutely convinced that something dangerous was happening inside her house because a frantic anonymous call had claimed that weapons, stolen military equipment, and possibly a fugitive suspect were hiding inside, and the department, already under pressure after a series of public scandals, had decided to respond with overwhelming force, bringing armored vehicles, tactical units, and officers who were clearly expecting confrontation rather than conversation. But what they did not realize was that the quiet woman inside that home was not just another civilian caught in the wrong situation, because Maya Carter had spent 12 years working in classified intelligence coordination for the Department of Defense, a position that rarely allowed her to speak about her work, but required connections and authority that stretched far beyond the local police department, now shouting through loudspeakers outside her front door. And as Maya sat at her kitchen table listening to the megaphone, demanding she exit the home with her hands up, she felt a mixture of disbelief and anger building inside her because she knew instantly that someone had either made a devastating mistake or deliberately set her up. Yet, despite the aggressive presence outside, she remained calm, taking a slow breath as the pounding on her door began and officers shouted orders that echoed down the quiet street. And through her front window, she could see silhouettes of heavily armed officers crouched behind patrol cars, their weapons aimed directly at her home, as if they were preparing for a siege, while inside Maya calmly reached for her phone and began scrolling through contacts that few ordinary citizens would ever have. Because while the officers outside believed they were about to arrest a dangerous suspect, they had unknowingly triggered a chain of events that would soon reach the highest levels of federal command. But the situation outside was escalating quickly as the commanding officer on scene, Captain Daniel Reeves, a man known in the department for his aggressive tactics and eagerness to prove results, barked orders to his team, while cameras from curious neighbors began recording the scene from across the street, something Reeves barely noticed because he was convinced that whoever was inside that house was involved in a serious crime, and that hesitation would make him look weak. Yet what Reeves did not know was that the anonymous tip he had received earlier that evening came from a source with a hidden agenda, a disgruntled former contractor named Victor Hale, who had once worked briefly on a defense project where Maya served as an oversight officer and who had been terminated months earlier after an internal investigation exposed irregularities in classified data handling, something Hale blamed entirely on Maya Carter despite the evidence against him. And in his bitterness, he had crafted an elaborate lie designed to cause maximum damage by telling police that Maya was storing illegal weapons and harboring a dangerous suspect, knowing that a heavy police response could potentially destroy her reputation or worse. Yet, as the officers continued shouting outside, Maya finally dialed a number that only a handful of people were authorized to use directly, and, after 3 rings, a calm voice answered from a secure operations office inside the Pentagon, the massive headquarters of the United States Department of Defense located across the river in Washington, D.C., and Maya spoke quietly but firmly, explaining that an armed police operation was currently surrounding her residence due to false allegations likely connected to a terminated contractor with a known grudge. And the moment the official on the line heard her name and credentials, the tone of the conversation shifted instantly because Maya Carter was not just an analyst, but someone who had coordinated sensitive interagency operations involving national security intelligence, meaning that any law enforcement action targeting her without federal coordination could represent a catastrophic jurisdictional mistake. And within minutes, a chain reaction began inside the Pentagon as supervisors confirmed her identity, cross-checked the claims reported by the local police department, and quickly realized that not only were the accusations baseless, but the suspect who had made the anonymous tip was already flagged in federal databases for attempting to access restricted systems after his dismissal, meaning the entire police operation outside Maya's house had been triggered by someone attempting revenge against a federal intelligence officer. And while Captain Reeves outside was preparing to authorize forced entry, Impatient after Maya had not immediately exited the house, the first call from a federal liaison reached the police chief's office downtown, causing confusion as senior officials suddenly demanded details about the operation currently unfolding in Arlington Heights. Yet by that point, Reeves had already ordered his officers to move closer to the house, their boots crunching on gravel as they approached the front porch with a battering ram ready, unaware that the situation had just escalated far beyond their authority. And just as the first officer raised the ram to strike the door, a black SUV turned onto the street, followed by two more vehicles with federal plates, moving quickly but without sirens, and the sudden arrival of the vehicles caused several officers to hesitate because the men stepping out were clearly not local law enforcement, but federal agents carrying identification that made even experienced officers straighten their posture. And within seconds, one of them approached Captain Reeves with a stern expression and informed him that the operation needed to stop immediately. Yet Reeves, already irritated and feeling his authority challenged in front of his team, initially resisted, insisting that he had probable cause based on the anonymous report and that whoever was inside had ignored lawful commands to surrender. But the federal agent calmly replied that the woman inside that house had already verified her identity with the Department of Defense and that any attempt to force entry would not only violate federal protocol, but potentially interfere with a national security employee currently under protection. And the tension that followed felt almost surreal as dozens of officers stood frozen under flashing lights, while Reeves realized too late that the situation he had treated as a routine raid had just turned into a federal embarrassment. Yet the biggest twist was still unfolding, because as the federal agents continued coordinating with the Pentagon, they also traced the origin of the anonymous call and confirmed Victor Hale's involvement. And by dawn, Hale himself was being detained by federal investigators who uncovered digital evidence proving he had fabricated the allegations in an attempt to retaliate against Maya Carter for his dismissal months earlier, turning what began as a dramatic police operation into a full criminal investigation against the very man who had triggered it. And when the story finally reached the media the following day, the narrative quickly shifted from a supposed criminal standoff to a shocking example of how easily misinformation could mobilize an entire police force against an innocent person, especially when that person happened to be someone quietly connected to the highest levels of national defense. And Captain Reeves, once confident he was about to lead a major arrest, suddenly found himself answering questions from internal affairs and city officials about why he had escalated the situation without verifying the source of the tip, while Maya Carter returned to her calm routine as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Though neighbors would never forget the night their quiet street became the center of flashing lights, armed officers, federal agents, and a single phone call that traveled straight to the Pentagon and turned 30 confident cops into witnesses of the biggest mistake of their careers.